World War II was not only a war of soldiers and strategy, it was a war of ideas. A war where engineers, scientists, and military planners pushed the limits of technology in ways the world had never seen before. In the shadows of the battlefield, far from the front lines, entire teams worked on machines that seemed to come straight out of science fiction. Massive tanks, experimental weapons, and radical concepts were designed with one goal in mind: to change the course of the war. Many of these projects were so strange, so ambitious, or simply too dangerous that they never made it into combat. Some were abandoned, others were destroyed before completion, and a few were so secret that they remained hidden for decades. Today, we explore the most bizarre war machines that never entered combat. Machines that were built to dominate, but never fired a shot. The land cruiser P-1000 Rata was one of the most extreme examples of military ambition ever conceived. Proposed by Nazi Germany, this super-heavy tank was designed to weigh over 1,000 tons. To put that into perspective, it would have been several times heavier than any tank ever built. The Rata was planned to carry naval guns, the same type used on battleships. These massive cannons could fire shells weighing hundreds of kilograms across long distances, turning the tank into a mobile fortress. It would have required a crew of dozens, possibly over 100, to operate its systems. Anti-aircraft guns would have been mounted on top to defend against enemy aircraft, while its armor was expected to withstand most conventional attacks. But the size that made it powerful also made it impractical. The Rata would have been too heavy for bridges, too large to hide, and an easy target for bombers. Its speed would have been extremely slow, and its fuel consumption enormous. Even within the German command, many began to realize that such a machine would be more of a liability than an advantage. The project was eventually canceled before construction began, leaving the Rata as one of the most famous what-if weapons of the war. What came next was even more bizarre. Another ambitious design was the land cruiser P-1500 Monster. If the Rata was excessive, the Monster was beyond reason. This proposed vehicle would have weighed over 1,500 tons and carried an enormous artillery gun known as the Gustav, a weapon capable of firing shells weighing several tons. Unlike traditional tanks, the Monster was less of a vehicle and more of a moving siege platform. It would have required specially prepared routes, massive logistical support, and constant maintenance. The sheer scale of the machine meant that it could never be used in fast-moving warfare. It would have been vulnerable to air attacks and extremely difficult to protect. As the war progressed and resources became scarce, projects like this were seen as unrealistic. The Monster never moved beyond the planning stage. While Germany pursued massive machines, other nations experimented with unconventional concepts of their own. One of the most unusual was the Soviet flying tank, known as the Antonov A-40. The idea was simple in theory. A light tank would be fitted with large wings and a tail, allowing it to glide through the air after being towed by an aircraft. Once released, the tank would land behind enemy lines, detach its wings, and immediately enter combat. It was an attempt to combine air mobility with armored power, allowing tanks to be deployed in areas that were otherwise inaccessible. In practice, the concept faced serious problems. The added weight of the tank made it extremely difficult for aircraft to tow. During test flights, the towing aircraft struggled to maintain altitude, forcing pilots to release the tank earlier than planned. Although a prototype did manage to glide and land successfully, the system was deemed impractical. The Soviet Union eventually abandoned the project in favor of more conventional airborne units. Another strange concept came from Germany: the Kugelpanzer. Unlike traditional tanks, the Kugelpanzer was spherical in shape, resembling a metal ball. It was designed with two large wheels forming its outer shell, with the operator seated inside. A small motor would allow the vehicle to roll across the ground. Its exact purpose remains unclear. Some believe it was intended for reconnaissance, while others think it may have been used for laying communication lines or even as a mobile observation post. Only one example is known to exist, captured by Soviet forces at the end of the war. Its thin armor and limited mobility would have made it highly vulnerable in combat, raising questions about how effective it could have been. To this day, the Kugelpanzer remains one of the most mysterious armored vehicles ever created. Not all bizarre war machines were designed for large-scale destruction. Some were created for more unusual purposes. The Goliath tracked mine was a small remote-controlled vehicle packed with explosives. It was designed to be driven toward enemy positions, tanks, or fortifications, where it would detonate. While the idea of a remote weapon was innovative, the Goliath had several weaknesses. Its control cables could be easily cut, its speed was very slow, and its armor offered little protection. Enemy soldiers quickly learned how to disable them, often destroying the vehicles before they reached their targets. Although some were used in combat, they were largely ineffective, and the concept highlighted the limitations of early remote-controlled weapons. Japan also developed unusual weapons, including the Kugisho MXY-7 Oka. This rocket-powered aircraft was designed as a suicide weapon, carrying a large explosive warhead. Pilots would guide the Oka toward enemy ships at high speed, making it difficult to intercept. While the weapon was deadly in theory, it required a larger aircraft to carry it into range. These carrier aircraft were often targeted and destroyed before they could deploy the Oka. As a result, the weapon saw limited success and suffered from significant operational challenges. Another radical concept was the American T-28 Super Heavy tank. Designed to break through heavily fortified positions, this vehicle featured extremely thick armor and a massive gun. Its design included multiple tracks to support its enormous weight, giving it a unique and intimidating appearance. However, its size and weight made it difficult to transport and operate. It was slow, complex, and not suited for the fast-paced nature of modern warfare. Only a few prototypes were built and the tank never entered combat. The Bell, known in German as Die Glocke, is one of the most mysterious projects associated with Nazi Germany. Unlike conventional weapons, it was not designed as a tank, an aircraft, or an artillery system. Instead, it was described as a device in the shape of a large metallic bell, hidden deep within a secret facility. According to post-war testimonies, the device was filled with a strange substance referred to as Serum 525. When activated, it was said to emit a violet glow and produce intense radiation. Witnesses claimed that during testing, plants would decay, animals would die, and even trained personnel would suffer fatal effects after exposure. The device appeared to manipulate forces that were not fully understood at the time. Some theories suggest it was an attempt at advanced propulsion. Others claim it may have been linked to early nuclear or anti-gravity research. There are even accounts suggesting that the project was moved and hidden as Allied forces advanced, possibly taken by high-ranking officials attempting to preserve its secrets. To this day, there is no definitive proof of what Die Glocke truly was. No confirmed blueprints, no surviving prototypes, only fragments of testimony, scattered documents, and a mystery that continues to fuel speculation decades later. Another ambitious concept was the Sonnengewehr, or sun gun. Unlike traditional weapons, this idea did not operate on land, sea, or air. It was designed to function in space. German scientists proposed placing a massive concave mirror into orbit around the Earth. The purpose of this mirror would be to concentrate sunlight into a focused beam capable of generating extreme heat. In theory, this beam could be directed at targets on the ground, igniting cities, destroying infrastructure, and causing widespread devastation without the need for conventional explosives. The concept was far ahead of its time. It required advanced rocketry, precise orbital control, and materials capable of withstanding the harsh conditions of space. At the time, none of these requirements could be met. The idea remained largely theoretical, explored by engineers, but never realized in practice. Despite this, it demonstrated a shift in thinking. Warfare was no longer limited to the battlefield. It was beginning to expand beyond the Earth itself. Among the most controversial and debated projects of the war was the alleged V-7, often described as a flying disc. Reports suggested that German engineers were experimenting with circular aircraft designs, capable of vertical takeoff and high-speed flight. These machines were said to use unconventional propulsion systems, possibly involving rotating turbines or advanced jet configurations. Witness accounts described objects with unusual shapes, moving in ways that did not match traditional aircraft behavior. However, unlike other projects, evidence for the V-7 is limited and highly disputed. No confirmed operational models were ever documented, and much of the information comes from post-war claims and speculative sources. Some historians believe the concept was exaggerated or misunderstood, while others argue that experimental designs may have existed but never reached functional status. The line between fact and myth becomes difficult to define. Whether the V-7 was a real project or a product of rumor, it remains one of the most enduring mysteries of wartime engineering. Many of these bizarre war machines shared a common problem. They were designed without fully considering the realities of warfare. Mobility, logistics, and practicality often outweighed raw power. A machine could be powerful on paper, but useless in the field if it was too slow, too large, or too complex. In many cases, simpler and more reliable equipment proved to be far more effective. These forgotten projects reveal a different side of World War II, a side driven not just by conflict, but by imagination. They show how far nations were willing to push technology even when the results seemed unrealistic. Some of these ideas would later influence future developments, while others would remain as warnings of over-engineering and misplaced priorities. In the end, these machines never changed the outcome of the war, but they left behind something else, a legacy of innovation, ambition, and the strange intersection between science and war. Hidden in archives, blueprints, and forgotten documents, these bizarre war machines continue to capture our imagination, not for what they achieved, but for what they could have been.